Exalted Entertainment Radio. This is Kiara D, and you just tuned into another edition of The Love Factor, where it's all about relationships. Today's show is we're talking about setting boundaries in dating and marriage, and I am so honored, so pleased, so thrilled to have my better half. Yes, he's my better half because he makes me better. On the show, my husband, Anthony. Thank you for joining me today, love.
It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be here. What's going on, everybody out here in Radio Land? Turn Time Family Values, Part 1. Here we go.
All right. So as I said, we are talking about setting boundaries in dating and marriage. And I know we have such a testimony to be able to talk from that standpoint, because that's something we had to live through. That's something that we've had to deal with. And so today we just want to share with you all how to set those boundaries. First and foremost, Anthony, if you could just share with everybody, the life that you was brought up in, like what got you to that point where you were eager about setting boundaries in our relationship.
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the two of the biggest blessings I've ever had in my life were my parents. Number one, watching my mother raise us until I was 13 years old by herself, and she met my stepfather, who continued to raise us. She always modeled a level of what they call holiness. They don't use that word a lot nowadays, but she modeled a level of holiness, self-control, discipline, and consistency. Those types of things we always saw from her. We never seen her chasing after men, or men coming and going. Wow. After my biological parents divorced, my mother didn't date anyone until she met my stepfather, who in turn raised my sister and I, and seeing that my mother kept herself abstinent, she kept a 100% level of chastity about her. She kept the household peaceful. Wow. We did not feel a sense of instability or need. Was vacant, because she always modeled up on time for work all day, come home, do homework, check on the kids, so these type of things.
So basically she set the tone for you.
Yeah. Seeing that walked out and lived out every day. And then when she finally met my stepfather, finally meeting him, who I consider my father, this is what I was able to look at and say, my mother was able to hold herself, keep herself with integrity, all these years, never anything that was a gray area about her, and it was because she always kept things going for us. She was either at work, helping out at church, taking care of us. It was always something to do. Boundaries were important, because in the long run, she had two kids that she had to raise on her own successfully.
And I honestly love that about your mom, the fact that she's a living example that it can be done. It's possible to set those boundaries and live a life of chastity until marriage, because I didn't see that growing up. I was brought up in a single parent home, and hats off to my mother because she did the best that she could. But at the end of the day, it was the fact that I had both of my parents were not living in the same household. And so it was a little different for me, but I have love for both of my parents, and they did a wonderful job, I would say, of raising us. And at the age of 13, just like you, that's when my stepfather came into my life, and he encouraged me to remain abstinent as well. And so that was my encouragement. At the age of 13, he instilled that in me. And from that point on, it was like, okay, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to try my best to really stay on that stay on that path, because, we don't see a lot of people living that lifestyle. Like, it's almost as if it's foreign to people. Like,
I would say one of the ways that boundaries were set was because my mother always had goals. Watching her as a single mother, she had goals of, one, moving us out of the duplex we were in to a better school district, number one. Number two was a brand new house. Number three was she wanted her own car. She didn't want a used car. She wanted her own car. So, coming up, and then my stepfather, my father reinforcing that, it was always about, what are your goals in front of you? And your goals in front of you was the motivation to continue to move on, because I remember the conversation he and I had, and he said, relationships and time for relationships are always going to be there. So boundaries and things like that, your bigger picture life goals were always in front of you. That was what you were shooting for and going for. So it made everything, everything else had its place. You weren't just sitting around waiting to date or go out on a date and things like that. You had other things you were pursuing, your education and goals and things like that.
So I know for me, I was a little hot mama. I'm not going to lie. I was a little hot mama, and I thought dating was the thing to do. But it was interesting once I met you to see that you were the complete opposite of me. You were brought up totally different than what I was brought up as far as my sphere of influence. I had a lot of people that influenced me in the wrong aspect. And I mean, yes, I had my head on somewhat straight, but at the end of the day, it was all on me to make those decisions. But I didn't know there was a such thing as setting boundaries for yourself. Like, I mean, of course, like I said, my stepfather, he enforced to remain abstinent until marriage. But other than that, I didn't know about how to pursue that abstinence. So I want to just talk about that a little bit. If you can shed light on that, how do people pursue that lifestyle?
Well, I think when it comes to boundaries, for whatever background, whatever background you come from, boundaries, I think a lot of times come from a faith system, what you believe. What you believe in terms, when you're following what you believe, your faith. A lot of times to be a successful disciple, particularly you're following that. It takes a discipline, and so boundaries, and you growing up, if you have something that you believe in, a core set of values and things like that, something that's being rehearsed and lived out and reinforced every day, that in turn starts to exercise those muscles that, equip you to be able to have some type of boundaries or discipline in your life.
That's good.
For example, like we were raised in a Christian home, Christian background founded on biblical teaching, and biblical teaching, going to church a couple times during the week and things like that. And that always being a consistent every week, we were in church at least 2-3 times a week. We were in fellowship with the body of believers who believe something, and my mother was living that lifestyle, following Christ, living for Jesus at home. Certain music and things was not allowed to be played. Certain things was not allowed to be on TV. Wow. So there's boundaries right there. She, in her house, when she was the queen of the house before our father came, certain things were allowed in the house and certain things weren't. If those things, if the entertainment or the media or any type of books or reading magazines, etc., if it did not line up to the standard of her faith, which was in the Bible, mm-hmm. and the teachings, grounded in there, then it was not allowed in the house. That was the beginning of learning a set of boundaries.
Now that you say that, that makes me think back to what my mom used to do. I remember I used to bring Bone Thugs and Harmony tapes home. Yes, that was back in the day. Tapes was the thing back in the day. And once my mama heard me listening to it, or if she saw the tape, she would confiscate it. And I used to get mad at her. Like, I paid for that with my own little fundraised money, but at the same time, like you said, it's a way of setting boundaries. And I didn't even realize that at that time, but I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about boundaries in dating, though, because we've talked a little bit about our upbringing, and we've also talked about boundaries within our households. But I know me and you have a very unique story that we don't really see often. And so first and foremost, I just want our audience to know, believe it or not, we waited until marriage. And I love the fact that we were able to do that, because now we can share with other people that it's possible. And one of the ways that we was able to do that is the fact that we set boundaries. And so for that reason, I know that we were not able to just sit there and be in each other's presence all day and all night without feeling some type of way. But I'm gonna let you expound on a little bit.
And that's a good point that you bring up. And see, not only that, we also had other people that were involved in our relationship. And when it comes to boundaries, and you were talking within a monogamous relationship of two people, maybe young people, whatever, adults that are courting each other, seriously, and considering marriage and things like that. If there's nobody else involved in that relationship, from an accountability standpoint, boundaries are going to go out the window. I don't care how strong anybody is. Every like the song, like the saying goes, every dog has its day, and every human has a point of weakness. Either I don't care how strong she is or how strong he is. There are points, we all deal with points of weakness in our lives as humans, and so that goes back how the Bible talks about man was not created to be alone. Even God created us all to have a sense of family. So when it came to boundaries, we had a number of people around us in our lives that were involved and aware of our relationship, that when they saw us, they would, how are y'all doing? What's going on? For example, my big sister Joy, I had my sister named Joy, and Brian, they would check us consistently. How late y'all staying over each other's house? What y'all been doing? Things like that. If you don't have anybody that loves you enough to challenge you on the truth when they see you, that's a pitfall right now. You might as well be a tightrope walker. So we had other people involved. For number one, we believe the same thing, and so we had other people involved in our community of faith that would check in on us from time to time. We had another young lady. She was like a mother figure, Chantel. How are things going in you guys' relationship? So they knew that we were trying to live and uphold biblical standards in our personal lives, even before we met each other. So when we got together and we weren't yet married, it was always not judgmental, but I want to make sure you're doing okay, because I want you to be honoring God with your lives and not end up making a mistake by hanging around each other too much, because once you have feelings for an individual, over time, they do overtake themselves if those feelings are not restrained or properly addressed.
Right. And going back to Joy, I love her. That is like one of my favorite people on this earth. I look up to her. I adore her because she is such a prime example of how it's possible. Again, she was another person that I know that was able to hold herself until marriage. As a matter of fact, her husband was the first one that she kissed, and she shares her testimony whenever she goes to speak to young ladies. And so it's not like I'm telling something that she hasn't already shared with a number of folks, but her husband was the first guy that she kissed. And I was like, whoa, and it's not like, sometimes people will get the misconception that, then they must not look that nice, but that's not the case at all. Joy's a very nice looking woman. And I mean, if you look at her lifestyle, like, she was brought up pretty much similar to you. And so I love that about her.
I'd like to say something when it comes to relationships. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But when it comes to relationships, I think when it comes to boundaries are concerned, we're really talking within the context of dating, or which should be more formally called courting. In the world system, as far as our media and entertainment puts today, it's always seems like you're dating, you're doing this and that. But from a biblical context, you courting that individual. I put it like this: for boundaries to be successful, there has to be a time limit on these boundaries. When it comes to a time limit, once you found a young lady, a young woman, and you're in a relationship that you have found to be, you guys have more than mutual interests, your faith and your beliefs line up and things like that, and it's gone beyond just, I just have a wonderful time with this person. These persons meet your standards and your core values and things like that. Well, then the stopwatch needs to be pressed on, because there's only a certain amount of going out to eat that can take place, going to movies, meeting the families. There needs to be some structures set up like ours was, that can help you be able to maintain your purity, your sexual purity and integrity until marriage, which is the goal, and which is not old-fashioned, but is what God requires of each of us anyway.
And I think it's funny that you brought up that point, because I see a lot of men who tend to just drag their feet on popping the question. I'm like, what's up, dude? Why you taking forever? What do you think the cause of that is, though?
Well, men respond to consequences, and men respond to deadlines. Those are two things that a man respects. A man respects consequences, period. out the gate. And what we did, what a lot of people didn't know was we actually had the pastor of our church, the senior pastor of our church that we were going to at the time. Once we had went through several months of dating and courting, just getting to know each other and really developing just an attraction and a connection with each other, where it went past being friends and the romance was there and all of that. What we did was we went through a book series together. Right. So we immediately put a time frame on this relationship, and the one thing I want to point out in the book, here just be very briefly, once we got to a certain chapter in the book forced both of us to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And if we were going to make a decision to be serious with each other, then here were the steps 1, 2, and 3 we needed to take, or we needed to end the relationship. Because like I said, there's only so many hugs and so many pecks on the cheek that can go on because we were created as human beings. God created all of us, to be able to respond. That sexual exchange, we were created to have that. But if it's experienced out of the wrong context, then you go into where you end up at what I would say a failure, or then sex takes place outside of marriage and things like that, and things just the natural order of things God had gets disrupted.
And like you said, men respond to consequences, and so sometimes the female don't give the men any type of consequences. I mean, yes, I know for me, I had in the back of my mind that if you didn't pop the question by this date, I was about to be done. But so I already had it up in my mind. I'm sure that's probably how other folks operate as well. Like some females like, oh, if he don't ask me within 2 or 3 years, I'm gone. But as the saying goes, why milk the cow when you could or why pay for the cow when you can milk it for free? Right. So if you're giving up free milk, you're not making that man pay for anything.
And I'd like to say this. Our relationship, it was set on a strict schedule. We were reading a book together. We both had copies of a book that we had weekly assignments to read this chapter. Then we would meet with the pastor. We read this chapter, meet with whoever the pastor assigned to us, mature couples that were already married and things like that. This next week, read that chapter. So our relationship, after I can't remember the month, the time frame we were together before we started it, but once we started that process, that just premarital counseling was what it was, knowing that our relationship was deeper than just being friends.
Mm-hmm. It was about almost a year.
Yeah, our relationship had time limits. Like I said, it had a time frame, and then after that time frame, that book was over with, we were forced to make a decision. So our relationship was forced either to be moved in the direction towards marriage and be something constructive and fruitful, or we either had to get out of that relationship. It had to be over with if we saw that God was not in it based on the structure and the foundation principles of that book. So we had really it was almost like working out with a trainer. We had weekly goals, monthly goals that we needed to get through this book, talk about it, get through these particular chapters and subjects, and move on. And once we got to a certain point, we did have to make a choice. And if a man or a woman is never forced to make a choice, and you guys are just going on and on and on and on, then complacency settles in, and you're not making constructive progress with your relationship.
As a woman, how can we encourage the man that talks about marriage with us? How can we encourage him to go ahead and move forward with things without coming off so strong?
Well, I think in this day and age, there's a song out. That it goes something to the extent of, I love her because she has her own. Women in this day and time is the culture and the way things are going for a woman. A woman has to have a say. She has to initiate certain things if it's not being initiated on the man's behalf. A woman nowadays has a voice that she didn't have in the past. So how can a woman do that? Number one, she can't be giving up the goods. If she's giving up the goods, then this type of talk, like I said, a man respects boundaries and consequences. If like I said, if he's able to go to the sugar shack for free when she's talking this marriage talk, he's like, look, we're already doing what married people do. We're already having sex and intimacy. What's the point of me taking you seriously? So if they're going on and that is taking place before anything else is really being solidified and getting to know one another and really hammering out what is this relationship about? That relationship is skewed. It's not destroyed or destructive as far as there is hope in that situation. But if there needs to be a level of, there can be no visit in the sugar shack until, like I said, this particular process is done. Like, it doesn't take 3 to 6 months to really figure out, knowing a person, but it has to be, you got a level of accountability in your life. Right. Somebody that, that can guide you guys through that process, like a pastor, something like that.
I know you said it doesn't take 3 to 6 months to know a person, but I would have to say if they're physical with each other, that could cloud up the view and you might not even really see who that person is, because once you get physical, it's like our emotions is just covered.
I agree. And what I like to say, to answer your question directly, what can a woman do to not seem so pushy? Number one, she needs to be able, there needs to be no physical going on. Because once the physical starts, the kissing, the touching, the caressing, the holding, the heavy petting, right, things like that, then that turns into articles of clothing being taken off. Then it turns into, well, how about we do this? Well, how about we experience each other here? How about it go here? Right. If any of that is taking place, she has to have it in herself, enough self-control and an understanding with both parties that this is not going on until we know where we're going in this relationship, and we've said I do.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with a woman meeting that guy and say, you know what, we're gonna get to know each other, but there's nothing going on until this is all safe for marriage. Period.
Now let's talk a little bit about how females. Well, first, before we go there, I just wanted to share a tidbit. You talked about how people get to that place of laying together, sleeping together. And I recall one thing Joy told me is like there are like 5 levels of intimacy or affection. I can't remember what she called it, but she always shared this with the groups that she went out and spoke with, because she did a little motivational speaking as well. But one thing she said was holding hands. Then she talked about hugging and kissing. And it's like you're igniting a fire, right, because once that flame gets to a certain level, it's kind of hard to put it out.
No backing down.
Right.
Agreed.
And so it's like, yeah, y'all might think we're being hard about this, but I'm telling you, if you hold yourself to those standards and those boundaries, I promise you it will help you to hold it together, because once you begin to entertain those feelings, it's just going to open up the door to more and make you want more.
And every situation is different. There is there is nowhere in the Bible where it's some cookie cut example that, you need to be dating 3 months, 6 months, right, 8 months, right, and then it goes to this and then it goes to that. I think that number one, before these parties engage in this type of relationship, that, both parties need to have a solid faith background
and know yourself.
Yeah, and accountability with the church. We're talking about this. We're talking about relationships from a biblical perspective today, because that's all we know. You and I, that's what we live in as far as the quote turn time family values. That's where we're coming from. We can't speak on anything else. What can women do? Women need to be able to have the self-control that no physical activity is going on. You need to be able to figure out who this, and be able to find out for yourself who this young man is.
Right. And if he can't respect that, then he ain't the one.
And both, like I said, both of you all need to be able, in a situation, there need to be some standards first before, you getting ready to talk about marriage. Number one, since we're going to go there, for the man and the woman, both of you guys need to have your own job, your own place of employment, your own residence, your own way of mode of transportation, so none of that becomes some type of unstable something. There's physical things already that needs to be in place before before you can call yourself really courting and dating somebody. You guys truly need to be adults first before this starts.
Yes. I totally agree. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about boundaries within marriage, because we talked a lot about the dating stage. So, but before we go there, one more thing I want to add to that. I know me and you, we got to the point where we set ourselves curfews, because after we was in each other's presence so long, it's like, I'm starting to feel some type of way. And, right, things your emotions could start getting the best of you. It's like, you want to take it to the next level. But again, we had to set those boundaries so we wouldn't go there.
And there's a song that's out, the old school song. It said, the nighttime is when the needs come out to breathe, and it really does. I mean, that's just how we were built. That's how we were built. There's at certain points of time, we were ready for certain activity. But setting the boundaries and things like that. And when it comes to curfew, even that can be sketchy. If it's just you and that and your significant other behind closed doors in one of you all's apartment. I mean, for some people that may not even be able to be handled. For integrity to be preserved. You know what I'm saying?
And I know when we were dating, I used to try to have somebody over whenever you came over for another level of accountability, because I always wanted to make sure I have a third party whenever I have a male visiting me. And so you was that male. Right. And I always try to make sure I have my brother or a friend or somebody. And so that was a level of accountability for me.
Yeah, and I think that's important. It keeps you guys safe when you're in a public setting and you're interacting in a public setting. It's really no need for you guys to be behind closed doors in a residence by yourself, dating and courting. I mean, once that happens, I mean, it may not be spoken, but there are plenty things that are unspoken that are being spoken, when you're in a relationship. And when the moment that door locks, not even that, when you guys both know that you're going to a residence behind closed doors and it's just going to be the two of you, you're already fighting those urges, especially if you love that person, you care about that person, and God forbid you're already attracted to that person, so all you're doing is playing with fire, Russian roulette every time you get together. I would propose, because I'm gonna stand here in front of you guys on this radio show, today, and I'm gonna let everybody know that we didn't always make it right. We did have several mistakes and slip ups where things just got too hot and heavy. Now,
we exposed ourselves when it happened.
And check it out. We did not have sex until marriage. We did make it to that point. But, what I'm saying is, once you really are passionately caring about somebody, and we had a history, together. We had time in this thing. It wasn't something we were really playing. We weren't playing at all. Right. We were really serious with each other. And once you're serious about somebody, you love them and you care for them. Genuinely, there comes a point where, you can't be alone by yourself. You barely can go to the amusement park by yourself. I mean, because once you do what lovers do and doing the things that lovers do together and out and about, you can't help but want to be all over that person.
And that's another reason why we used to get to the point where we would meet up at Starbucks or some public place just for that sake, because we know how we were once we got alone, if we got a chance to be alone. And so we was really just trying to hold ourselves accountable. But let's go ahead and move it forward, because we only have a little bit of time left. Let's talk about boundaries within marriage. I know one thing we did first when we were dating to set a boundary within our marriage was, as soon as we got together, we made it a point to delete all the phone numbers out of our phone book.
When we made our relationship exclusive.
Right.
Make sure you point that out. We weren't married yet.
Right.
But we considered that, once we decided that this is it, you're the one I want to be with, and I'm considering in this regard. And we made ourselves exclusive.
Right.
We
deleted.
We weren't openly talking to anybody or considering having any other friends of the opposite sex.
Right. So we deleted all the numbers of the opposite sex out of our phones because we wanted to show each other that we were serious. And you're probably like, okay, it ain't that deep. But the thing is, when you have friendships of the opposite sex, you are more prone to having emotional infidelity. What's that you say? Emotional infidelity is when you begin to open up yourself and expose yourself to someone of the opposite sex. And it gets to the point where you start catching feelings because you done shared too much about your personal life, too much about your relationship. And next thing you find yourself catching feelings for that individual. And it's like, they're getting more of your attention than your spouse. Right. And so that's what emotional infidelity is. And feel free to look it up if you want a little bit more detail on it. But yes, I think that was very key in our relationship as far as helping us be successful.
I'd say I agree with you 100%. Kiera, it help us to take another step in the trust, because trust should never be given. Let me make that clear. When in a relationship, trust and respect should never be given. It should be earned in a relationship. And in today's time, with all this socialness and social media and things like this, and knowing people, we made it a point that we were going to show each other. You know what? At this tender point, at this infancy stage in our relationship, this is what we were willing to do as we were building our trust. Over time, as I've myself being in business and things like that, having my own business, and being in communications, you develop contacts out. We develop business. We develop business contacts and things like that. Everybody you see for me is not going to be a man. Everybody you saw was not going to be a woman.
Right.
Those contacts were built from there. But like I said, every relationship is different, but you have got to do the things that are going to, show each other that this is an exclusive thing, and you're not for play.
And that helped me to build trust, because my trust have been, I've been betrayed a number of times in the past, and so it was hard for me to trust people. And when you did that, that really meant a lot to me, because I was like, man, like nobody's ever done this before. But me, I was the type of female that hung around dudes all the time, and so it was like that was the norm. But now it's like, man, dang, I gotta say bye to my homeboys. Like, dang, we can't kick it like that no more. But at the end of the day, as the saying go, you lose some, but you gain some. And so I gained you, which is the best gift that I could have ever gained from losing some on this earth.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I want to say this, a lot of times when it comes to, and I'm gonna just say this from the heart, that if nothing else is said from our conversation today, is this: when you ask me what are boundaries from the heart, and what does it have to do with relationships as far as it's concerned, and all the questions that you've asked and we've talked about and things like this, it comes down to this. In the world in which we live, coming up in school, guess what? Schools were open from a certain period of time, and they were closed at a certain period of time. It needs to be the same way as you are dating and courting and going to that and really taking yourself serious. For a lot of us going to school, our schools were opened up at about 7:30. They were over with at 2:30. Guess what? At about 5:30, if you didn't have an official reason why you needed to be at this school, you didn't have access to the school. And that should be as well as for young women and young men. That's schools, like I said, and any business and things like that. A lot of business places are open for business at about 8 a.m. and guess what? They close about 5 o'clock. After 5 o'clock, guess what? There's no interaction. There's no knocking on the door. Sorry, sir, we're closed. There has to be a start time and a finish time to your interactions, because too much, then you open. Then once it's too much and it's always available and always access, you give place to your emotions and your feelings creeping in, and to the weaknesses of just being, just the nature of being human. So it's got to be a start time, a finish time. And people might have think that was preschool with us. Our end time with each other was 10:30 every night, yes. Weekends included. Unless we were out and about. We had to have a start time and an end time. And I think that's important. You got to have, okay, we're going to get together at this time. Right. We're leaving at this time. I'm dropping you off and you're dropping me off. And you know what? A lot of times, we see these fairy tale stories, these urban love stories where you stayed on phone all night. That's not good either.
But we had some conversations back in the day.
We had conversations, and it felt good. But here's the thing. If you never have a chance to disconnect from each other, you just keep them fires smoldering and smoldering and smoldering all day, all night. So, we had it to where once we left each other's presence at 10:30, I'd call you to let you know I was home, and I'll see you in the morning, or I'll talk to you tomorrow, and left it at that.
And one thing I remember my grandmother used to always say is, ain't nothing open after midnight except White Castles and legs. And so after a certain time, you should know your feelings start to act a certain way. Like, it's just, I don't know, something about that time of the night.
I mean, and that's true. You can be white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. You can be German, French, Polish. American. It does not matter. It's the same for everybody. Nighttime is a time for people, for grown folks, lovers, married couples. That's it.
Right. And I know you are probably looking at the time right now like, y'all going over a little longer, but that's the beauty of podcasting, because I got a few more things I want to say. And so, thankfully, we got the liberty to do that. So this is one of the shows that we're probably going to go over for the first time, but hey, we got the liberty to do that. But as I was saying, as far as boundaries within marriage, let's get back to that. One thing like I said, we set the tone in our dating when we deleted the phone numbers. And so once we got to
other things that we did
right. And so once we got to marriage, it got to the point where it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be around anybody of the opposite sex alone unless I have to. Like for me, sometimes I had to work with a male coworker, and we had to go set up at events by ourselves. And so, of course, that meant we had to ride in the same vehicle together. I had to be alone, but again, that level of trust was developed early on in our relationship. So once that I got to that point, my husband already knew I was going to take care of business. And not only that, I had no problem introducing him to anybody that I work with any given time, or letting him have access to my phone or whatever any given time, because I have nothing to hide.
Now let me make that clear. It's not like I'm sitting there. I wasn't sitting there talking about what's in your phone, what's going on in your phone. I know you're not saying that, but I'm just want to make it clear for radio purposes that wasn't a problem with your boy. Things like that. Like we were talking about, from the infant stage to our, relationship starts to grow up and grow up and grow up. Boundaries adapt and evolve. You know what I mean? What once was an issue that we needed to address early on in our relationship, as we grew older, we're getting ready to celebrate 5 years of marriage, and about 7 years being together total. Certain things at the early stages of the relationship, were an issue or not an issue now. It does grow and evolve. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I want. The people that are listening, the nature and the aspects of those boundaries do evolve over time. You know what I'm saying? And it does change, and it changes as you guys both agree and come to an understanding. Well, why is it that we need to have no opposite sex friends or close friends, not things like that, because you are guarding against your heart going another way to someone else, and once you guys are agreeing and understanding each other on that, it's not like we're just giving you a book of rules. You both are agreeing and really communicating and understanding what affects each other on that.
One thing I know I dealt with way before I got married is I was talking to a coworker who was having problems in his marriage. Now, why was I giving advice to somebody that was married and I had no clue about how marriage worked? I don't know, but obviously he entrusted my advice. Well, needless to say, that turned against me, because he started thinking, oh, well, she understands me. Oh, she know what she's talking about. Maybe I should have married her. And as a result, he ended up trying to make a pass at me. And so I just want to encourage you all to make sure you are mindful of the type of conversations you have at work or anywhere, with people of the opposite sex, especially, because that can have an influence on your relationship as well. Like, he started catching feelings only because I was giving him advice as to how to reach his wife. And so that's one thing I know my husband has taught me since we've been together, being mindful of those type of conversations with the opposite sex, as far as talking about relationships and sex and all that, because those conversations could get kind of sticky.
And what Kiera is saying to those of you who are listening, boundaries are very important. If we look at our world today, let's just be very simple. Our streets have yellow dotted lines to keep certain drivers going one way in a lane and the others going in another. After so long on a city block, you have street lights. These are designed to keep the perfect traffic flow, keep stuff from crashing into each other. A lot of people, I can hear somebody listening right now talking about, what is it with all these boundaries? I didn't grow up with boundaries and whoop-de-whoop, blah, blah, blah. I didn't grow up with boundaries, just that. And, or my parents didn't have them. Maybe that was why your parents or that relationship didn't make it. Now, that's not a knock, but it's like this. We put boundaries on everything in our life, if you think about it, in order for the safety of all those involved. We can just use the car example. When you go out, when you get in your car or you're a passenger in a car, you're putting on seat belts, and the drivers are supposed to abide by the rules designed by the state, to keep everybody involved safe as they go to their destination. Check this out. If you're in a relationship with someone that is not just we go to the movies every now and again. This is somebody you both are considering marriage at the end of the long term, which is your destination. destination, being together in holy matrimony, being married. That's the destination. Okay, so if that's the destination, once you get there, now to keep traveling along that way, you have got to set some things in place so that both parties can continue on safely. And what going on safely, that's boundaries. That's where boundaries come in. You guys aren't going out, and guys are not coming in. Neither one of you are coming in any time of night. Right. Things like that. That's a boundary, because that ensures the safety of the person, whoever is at home waiting for you. They trust and know that you're doing what you're supposed to do and considering their needs. So the boundaries are to keep each other safe.
Ladies, let me shed a little light with you. Something I never knew until I got married was when we as women give men hugs, we got folks, it's happening everywhere. You might hug your coworker, or you might hug somebody at church. But if it's somebody of the opposite sex, ladies, more than likely, if you putting both hands around them, he's trying to cop a little feel from the top. He's trying to cop a little feel from your chest. So what I encourage you all to do is be mindful of those hugs and do the one hand. Yeah, you might think it's a little phony hug, but it's going to keep you at the end of the day. It's going to help that brother to stay kept, because don't nobody need that lust on them. Let's just keep it 100. But yeah. Well,
my wife, she done got into some personal vendetta she's shooting out right now, and that's all good, because I really think we just hit in a number of things, and just taking it on the lighter side. There's so much you can talk about as far as boundaries, the nature of boundaries, and what to do, what not to do, when you're single, then when you're dating, and things like that. And it should be, because we live in a world now that just says, oh, you can do whatever you want and everything will be fine. No, it's not, because then that's why you see a lot of our celebrities, athletes, musicians, mug shots, in trouble, and things like that, because they're not exercising proper boundaries when it comes to their life. So let's just stop and take a minute and think about that. When the lights are off and the cameras are done flashing, a lot of these people we idolize in the entertainment world, et cetera, are struggling so badly because they don't have any boundaries. You know what I'm saying? Right. Boundaries are to do nothing they're gonna keep you, y'all. It ain't nothing old fashioned. You know what? If we didn't have boundaries in our lives today, you know what I'm saying, we really would, like I said, I just going back to the car example, we wouldn't be safe out here. Mm-hmm. Boundaries are something, and I just think we really hitting the tip of the iceberg of it. Boundaries is something that's going to help us stay safe in the long run. Right. So that's what she's getting at. I think she's just, I'm just happy.
No, but one more thing I wanted to add is something that I like to share with every female that I come across whenever we get into these type of conversations is never leave your friend with your man. Never leave your friend with your man, because yes, that might be your homegirl. She's trustworthy. But let me tell you something. Cupid, he could hit anybody and everybody. And I recall a situation where somebody, best friend, slept with her baby daddy that she was living with. Like, how do you sleep with your best friend's baby daddy? I don't understand. And then to have it, do it in their bed, that's just total disrespect. But it probably was a level of trust that she had with her best friend, and they never expected that to happen. So ladies, I just want to put that little bit of tidbit in your ear, because stuff happens and emotions rise up. Yes, they might not be attracted to each other, but once things start getting hot and bothered, or somebody start feeling some type of way, the attraction means nothing. That attraction can go out the door any moment.
I think, and just to ride on really what Kira is talking about, for those of you listening, boundaries are important to ensure the safety of a relationship, mm-hmm. and ensure the life and the health of the relationship in the long run. You know what I mean? And you have got to guard every aspect. If you're really serious in your relationship, you're not in it for play. Like I said before, if you're trying to make this something that is going to be forever, you've got to have your relationship guarded on every way. Yes. From everybody else. Yes. If you're a young woman, it's with that young man, it's set up, the boundaries are set up to guard from every other thing. That means your friends, his friends, your family, his family, anybody else, relationship at work. You're setting up boundaries to keep every aspect of your life guarded, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, physically, and you got to do that, because we have so many different areas where our relationships can fall through the cracks. That's what boundaries are for.
All right. Well, babe, I want to say thank you for joining me on the show today. You brought a lot of wisdom and insight to the show. And again, you all, don't forget you could join us again right here, same time, same place next Saturday, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's the Love Factor, where it's all about relationships. I'm Kiara D, signing off.